Welcome to Practice Disrupted, a podcast where we find ways to create new solutions to current challenges while elevating the value of architects. I'm your host, Evelyn Lee, an architect who spans tech as an angel investor, startup advisor, and founder of Practice of Architecture. Whether you're a seasoned architect or just starting in the field, this podcast is your gateway to think differently about the role architects play within our global community. Hello, Disruptors. Welcome to this week's episode of Practice Disrupted. I often talk about the need for architects to listen to those outside the profession, as they may profoundly affect the architecture industry, including how we do our work. Today's guest, Dave Lemont, ran Revit for 5 years as a CEO before it was sold to Autodesk and has gone on to consult with early-stage venture-backed startup companies. Dave has over 3 decades of experience scaling software companies across industries, having held 5 CEO roles and 10 board member positions. He has also held numerous leadership roles at some of the world's most successful B2B or business-to-business software companies. He currently serves as Executive Chairman of Acelab, where I also serve as an industry advisor, and we'll dig a little into that. But Dave, thank you so much for finding time in your busy schedule to join us today, and welcome to the show.
Evelyn, it's great to be here and good to see you.
Yes, good to see you again. So Dave, we often open each episode by asking a little bit of an icebreaker. Is there anything not in your formal bio that might be fun to share with our listeners today?
Well, one of my passions is photography, and I'm actually sort of a semi-professional photographer. I call myself third wind photography. So you can find me at 5:30 in the morning taking pictures of sunrises, or going to the botanical gardens to take pictures of beautiful water lilies or chasing birds around. So I think it's sort of my love of color and light and texture. And I think it's a side of me that loves architecture, quite frankly, that's, keeps kind of bringing me back to that world as well. But probably people don't know that about me, I guess.
No, and I honestly don't know if it's anything that actually shows up in your LinkedIn profile. So nothing that I would have guessed. This is new news for me. Dave, the interesting thing is that you've kind of landed yourself in the AEC space, but let's back up a little bit. And you even started so long ago when we were talking earlier to mention one of your first jobs. I don't know if you want to go back that far, but can you walk us through your career journey, both leading up to Revit and even how you found yourself there?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. If I go way back to the early 80s, and I hate to date myself, but I was probably one of the first computer-aided design salespeople in the US, focused around mechanical engineering products, but also one of the first computer-aided design systems for architecture. And so got to meet a number of famous architects, 35 years ago. So that was pretty interesting. But I progressed from sales into general management and running companies. And I have run 5 different startup companies. You can call me a serial startup CEO, I guess. I ran a company called Concentra, which was the first company I ran that I actually took public. And we sold the company to Oracle. It was an engineered to build sales configurator, actually, for building product manufacturers. And I spent a year at Oracle. After the year of hard labor at Oracle, well, I'll leave out what I did next, actually. But I did run another startup called AppIQ, which was storage management software that wound up being acquired by Hewlett-Packard. I then ran a automated foreign currency trading company called Currency, clever name. And we sold that to Awanda, which is a Canadian foreign currency trading company. And more recently, I ran a company called Cubics that was automated logistics. Sold that company to Trimble, and I spent a couple of years at Trimble. But I think why I'm here on this show is what I'm probably best known as, being the CEO of Revit. And so, oddly enough, I worked at a company called Computer Vision many years ago. The founder of SolidWorks, which was a predominant company in the CAD space, was on the board of Revit, which was then called Charles River Software. But we worked together at Computer Vision, and he urged the team to hire me. Based upon the relationship we had at Computer Vision, and I became the CEO of Revit about a year after they started building the product. It was actually called Charles River Software at the time when I joined. And we changed the name to Revit. Revise instantly was sort of what that name was really all about for all you Revit fans out there. And, it was an amazing job. I mean, I got to see, got to travel all around the world and meet some of the most famous architects that were, kind enough to give Revit a try in its earliest days, and learned a lot about the business of architecture, as well as the workflows in architecture. And, I've always been drawn to it, and look, this is where we live and where we work. And so, buildings are everything to our lives. So it's just always attracted me, quite frankly. I've also been on the board of a company called Noteforma and a few other companies in the AC space. And now I'm an advisor to Hiarc, which is an incredible company automating the production building space, from everything from design of home plans to sales configuration. And then now most recently, along with advising a few other companies, I'm the executive chairman of Acelab.
I didn't actually realize you had that Hierarch connection. They just did, is it their Series B that they just finished out?
Yeah, they just raised a phenomenal amount of money. They are a juggernaut of a company right now that's changing the home building industry dramatically. They're an amazing team of people that's, I'm privileged to work with.
Yeah. And I believe I always kind of like the point he may or may like not like me doing this, but the CEO is actually a Harvard GSC dropout that decided to go and pursue a Hierarch instead of finish out his architecture degree. I want to go back to you though. What was interesting to me is I feel like it takes a certain type of mindset to do and be a startup, especially a serial startup entrepreneur. So where do you think that comes from for you?
You know, my dad always owned his own businesses, and often said to me, I don't think I can work for someone else ever. I need to kind of run my own thing. And so maybe I got that a little bit of that entrepreneurship from my dad, but more or less, I would say that having worked in big companies, which I did at the beginning of my career, and then probably just being fortunate to get an opportunity to work in some smaller companies, it's very clear that in a company like Hiarc or Acelab, 5 or 6 people can get together on Monday and make a decision, and it can be changed on Wednesday if we immediately saw signs that we didn't do the right thing. And so the ability to make decisions very rapidly, and also there's an excitement of every person's idea really counts in a company like that. It doesn't, what I've loved about startups, it doesn't matter if I'm the CEO, or I'm a salesperson who was just joining the company, or an engineer. Everybody's ideas, particularly the people that talk to customers, those ideas are the most important. And, listening to everyone's ideas and then rapidly moving. Startups are all about speed. And so, sometimes you can work too fast, but, being able to move quickly and then having everybody joined around the same mission, it is a very exciting environment to always work in, which is why, I've sold some of the companies and worked, to bigger companies and worked there for a year. And I normally, and not a knock against them, couldn't wait to get out and go back to, a small team again.
I mean, what was interesting to me when you were running through all of the companies that you did a startup for, they are not necessarily in the same industry, too.
Right.
And I think, can we talk a little bit about that? Because, architects pigeonhole themselves in the worst way, saying like they can't get out of their own way to do anything outside the industry. And then here, yourself, a serial entrepreneur that is running startups in multiple different industries. So what are you taking from each one, and what drives the passion to start up something in a new industry?
A lot of it is the fun of learning something new, and that's exciting to me, so like I love I think it's the Michelangelo shirt. I'm always learning. I don't know if you've seen that shirt, that saying by I think probably by him, I guess. It's attributed to him at least, or maybe it was Da Vinci, I'm not sure. But so I love to be learning something new. And so my expertise is sort of figuring out the product market fit and how to explain things to people so they understand the value of something, and then how to build a software company. And so in that respect, I am doing the same things, some of those same skills over and over again, and applying it into a different, space. To be honest with you, some of these spaces are super interesting and some are less so. And maybe that's why I keep coming back to the world of architecture, because I do find it, very interesting. And, more because of the, accounting software can be only so much fun. But
Right.
something that makes a building, a place we live in, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm a little bit biased, but I
Sure.
would have to agree, buildings over accounting. Just for our listeners who's not used to kind of the language or the lingo of startups, help them understand or help me understand even better. What does product market fit mean when you talk about that kind of being what you're really good at?
Well, there's all sorts of amazing technologies and things you can build with technology.
Hmm.
Look, we'll probably talk about AI at some point, maybe in this conversation. And oh my God, there are so many amazing things you can do with it. It doesn't mean that you could necessarily build something that would solve someone's business problem, or someone would be willing to spend their hard-earned dollars on to solve the business problem. Sometimes things are nice to haves, but not absolutely necessary to haves. So fine tuning a set of product features into something that a market in a repeatable way would want to acquire is what product market fit is really all about. And then you've got it right so that a business could be scaled as a result of it. So it isn't that you can, there's always a few people that want to buy something, but is there a whole market? Can you solve a whole market's problem? And that's what product fit is about.
Great. I just wanted to make sure that our listeners are caught up with the language that you are using, because a lot of them do just come from traditional architectural backgrounds. But let's dig into the architecture piece of it and why you keep coming back to architecture. You noted being one of the first CAD salesmen, and even in your startups, you kind of found your way back to these architecture pieces. So what is it so interesting, maybe beyond the buildings? Is it the opportunity even that our industry presents?
Architecture has an opportunity to do something for people in the world. Not all the software that I managed or sold in my life, had that potential impact. So, how this room feels I'm sitting in right now affects me all day. Where you go to school, what the efficiency of that building, all of that, how a museum looks, how we feel when we walk in. All those things affect our lives. And so, it's a privilege to be involved in technology that can make that more efficient, because it's such a hard job to define it in lines and words.
Yes.
It's so difficult to turn that vision into something that can be actually made. And the construction world is more challenging because when you manufacture a product, you manufacture the same thing thousands of times, but each building's a little bit different. So you're taking your skills and you're applying it to make something unique. With a little, that's why people hire architects, to make something special, something different. And so, that's kind of a really cool thing to be involved in, and to create technology that can allow people. Often the problem is the tediousness of the whole problem holds people back from being as creative as they could be. And that's not just limited to architecture, that's limited to anything that we do. If I have to add the numbers up on a piece on the back of a brown paper bag, that's different than a spreadsheet counting them instantly for me, or an accounting system automatically sending a bill out to a customer.
Right.
Now I'm freed up to think. Now I'm freed up to be creative,
Hmm.
as opposed to chasing an antiquated process or set of things that are just don't add value, but they have to be done.
Right. But architects do a lot of that too, right? Our set of things that don't
They
add value
do.
that have to be done. So let's dig a little bit into that. And you as chairman, of Acelab. Can you help our audience members, though, differentiate between obviously being an advisor at a startup like Hierarch and a chairman of Acelab, and how those roles might be a little bit different from one another?
Yeah. Well, first off, at Acelab, I'm a chairman, which means I'm on the board of directors. So I
Mhm.
have oversight responsibility for the company, as well. In a company like Hierarch, where I'm an advisor, I'm more of a consultant. So I'm helping problem solve various areas the company may need some of my expertise to move quicker. As an executive chairman at Acelab, I'm not only involved in oversight of the company, but I'm more involved in the day-to-day operations. I'm helping the team, build processes, strategies, hire people, and more of a day-to-day operational responsibility.
Yeah. So, what is Acelab doing that attracted you so much that you actually wanted to step into the chairman role as just, sort of just being advisorial to it?
So I think we all want to do things with our time that have an impact. So if I think back to Revit, the world was drawing in AutoCAD in 2D, pretty much lines and arcs for the most part, in what was not a very intelligent representation of someone's ideas. And Revit brought the concept of creating a three-dimensional parametric model of a building. And with that came a complete revolution in productivity, in the ability to describe something for other people to understand it, to create drawings more quickly, to get takeoffs more quickly. So that was a profound change to the world of architecture, without a doubt. And, I didn't build that software. Other brilliant people built it. I was fortunate, to help, guide the company. Acelab is doing something I believe similar in the world of materials. So you've got a great design, okay. Now materials can make that design greater, or it can ruin that design. And the problem I think that architects face, I think that people graduate from school like excited about materials and all the innovations they may have learned about in school, but then reality sets in. Like, oh my God, I'm just working on drawings. Or, like I've been given some job to research something and I'm calling manufacturers on the phone and waiting on 800 numbers. And there's just no time. I mean, architects are so stressed for time. And the process around finding the optimal material for a project based upon aesthetics and performance and sustainability and climate issues, all those things, is there's no time. There's no good process for it. And so material, which is as important as the design, is now it's like, oh, let's go with what we know. Let's go with what we used before. And here's the irony about that, Evelyn. Architects don't even have a good system to know what they historically used before. It's in the minds of one of the key partners that I have to go track down and ask. So not only is the firm not innovating on new products, that when the innovation in products are incredible, happening every day, I'm not even that good at storing all my institutional knowledge about what it is that we did before.
Yeah.
So Acelab is attacking this problem of trying to have this integrated material management workflow, from research to planning a project and what I need to find, to finding it visually, which architects love. Because the other problem that architects have is they can't be an expert in every product. The whole firm can't be an expert in everything. So Acelab sort of built this method of asking you questions to guide you to find the product that solves the problem you're trying to solve on a project. And then we let you put it into a firm library so that you've got it institutionalized for every person in the firm, young people in the firm that are just learning about materials, to go to this central hub, material hub for the firm. So I'm excited. I think you can see I'm passionate about it, as this complementing all the great design tools that have been evolving is an important workflow that just has not been optimized for the practice.
Yeah, no, I definitely am guilty of what is that? What was the last Armstrong ceiling tile we used on that product, that project 5 years ago?
Right.
Let's reuse that one again. And obviously they're constantly evolving their materials, but unless their rep has stopped by recently or said something, or I took the time to stop by their booth in an expo floor, I'm not necessarily I don't have time to go find a better ceiling tile for that specific project. So, how is Acelab, I guess, helping surface these new materials to architects too?
Acelab has done this incredible work sort of behind the scenes over the last several years of indexing just about every building envelope product in the United States for like 30, close to 30,000 products by hundreds of attributes. And we're continuously doing that and continuously meeting with product manufacturers with a team of experts so that, believe it or not, we can actually make recommendations to architects, like what is the right use case for this specific. And then, by the way, use some AI technology to have the platform do it automatically. So we're trying to be the expert for the architect and be the repository so that, ask Acelab, whether it's through one of our quizzes, and our filters to find the right product, or an expert helping, or a library that you saved all these learnings inside of. But that's what we're trying to do here, is stay on top of all this so that we can free up the architect to spend more time on design or more time getting the right material. So, because that's going to be a better project outcome and a better world. I don't want to be too dramatic about it, but if you don't have the time to find more sustainable materials, then you'll keep going with that same product that you had before, that when you could have chosen one at the same price that was sustainable. But if we're sorting all those materials by the attributes around sustainability and certifications for you, and then we actually even put the products next to each other with all the attributes and let you shortlist them and compare them in one place, instead of like opening up some spreadsheet or little stickies on your computer. This idea of keeping all the information in one place and then having colleagues be able to share it and look at it, that's how we move the industry forward.
The other interesting thing to me is pricing. So when I was in a firm, I did a lot of K through 12 communities, universities, and then at some point we would always end up being asked to VE the project, right? But is Acelab, because it's all index then, I feel like you can more clearly see the trade-offs that you're making, price over value and manufacturing process, as well as like the performance of those materials too.
This is really critical. And it's a real big problem because, like interest rates have gone up, almost double or triple in some cases for what they were. So, a $3 million project is all of a sudden like a $4 million project, and so that means that if the project's going to continue, there has to be some value engineering. And so now I need to find other products that sort of meet the performance and the aesthetics, but they're less expensive, and I can still get them. So lead time becomes very critical as well.
Right.
We're putting a massive effort. In fact, we just hired an expert into the company literally today that is going to lead this effort of adding pricing information on all the products in ranges so that an architect can quickly get that quick look on, does this wood window with this energy efficiency, how does it compare to the aluminum window in this use case? And oh God, this is twice as expensive. That's not going to work for my budget. And we want to keep giving tools to do that quick understanding of where am I in the budget? What are my value engineering choices? What are my product substitution choices? And because that's the reality of what the client expects.
What I also love about this, if you think about it, like I know so many architects that actually rely on their GCs. Like they can't actually fully price out what they're designing, right, until they get a GC involved. I feel like if you can begin capture pricing and like supply chain availability too, that places some of that power back in to the architects, because then there's this long kind of turnover when it comes to, this is the design that we have in our rendering with this product in it. And then we go to the GC and we find out that it's overpriced. And then we have to find out a new product. But it shortens that whole negotiation process.
It shortens that negotiation. Look, architects are responsible for 70 to 80% of the decisions on most projects. But then it does eventually get to a contractor, and then a VE phase could take place. one of the interesting things we're doing in Acelab is you can invite the contractor into your project. And they can see the products you've selected and begin to comment on them and say, hey, listen, this looks like a great product, but it's a bear to install. Or the time to install it is going to cost us extra labor, or the delivery has been really bad, or I know of a less expensive solution that we trust now. And so that collaboration can be that cycle of going back and forth can be shortened down through collaboration on the same information.
Right. And then what I really love about Acelab, and I think we're going into like an Acelab love fest here though, but it's free for architects.
It's free for architects. And the other interesting thing is it's founded by architects. So they care about, they're passionate. We keep hiring more and more architects and material experts. And so, there's this like by architects for architects, sort of zen in the company. And honestly, I am firm on the idea that we need to keep it free for architects because I don't want a barrier to change, to be in front of improving this workflow. And that's, I think, critical so that, there's no reason why an architecture firm can't pick this up and be more productive.
Yeah. And as somebody who is focused on business operations and building in productivity and giving time back to architects so they can actually spend their time on what's most valuable, I think that's what I'm excited about. So if anyone else is listening to the podcast and is really interested in learning more about Acelab, we'll definitely drop it in the show notes or go visit directly acelabusa.com and register for an account.
I just think that there's a big opportunity here to do better. And, materials really matter. And I want to ignite that excitement again about materials in this industry.
Yeah, materials is one of those things. I'm not a technical drawing person. I can't get excited, but I am kind of like, I love just going through material libraries. So as things move from what is like the bigger things that take up a lot of space in firms and, this so much change in technology that is happening with materials, just the idea that it's more easy to discover it on one platform, I think is just another reason why I'm super excited about what Acelab is doing. I want to go a little bit deeper into just tech within architecture in general. So Acelab is one tool, but I feel like it's one tool of what we will see as many coming out to really help out the advancement of the AEC industry. Taking a step back from your chairman role and looking more broadly about what's happening with AI and even how architects tend to be late adopters or later adopters of this technology. Right. Where do you envision the future of tech and AEC heading, and where's the biggest opportunity for us?
Definitely AI. And there, like for instance, I'll give you some examples of prototypes that I know have already been developed. Like Hierarch has been developing many of these already. Acelab has too, and other companies. Like taking a PDF and translating it into a model. Just figuring out that these lines represent a master bedroom, and there are 5 windows in that room, and so sort of figuring out what that space is without someone having to input something into another system. Having a system read that information with AI and automatically generate some of the intelligence that you might have generated had you designed it that way in that software to begin with. That's pretty cool. The other stuff is digital twin technology. So, the ability to create a digital model of the as design from the as being built world to the as built world and compare it back to the as designed world, because this building is going to be around for the next 50, 100 years, and we have to maintain it and we have to renovate it and improve it. And the way it was built isn't exactly the way it was designed because things had to be done on site and all sorts of things occur, and and the building shifts. And so how can we get accurate models, twins of the original design that then can be lived on for the industry to improve it or maintain it? And so And then, like we're doing a bunch of things around search. Like, how about like automating recommendations? One of the things we want to do at Acelab is you tell us, I want to optimize on price, performance, and sustainability in that order. And then, we'll look at all the attributes and all the histories of what people are doing and recommend something based upon some sort of a scoring system, so that we can really help hone in on 100 choices, but two or three of the best choices based upon, what it is that architect is really trying to solve for in the moment. So, those are just a few of the things that I'm seeing and being involved in myself on some opportunities.
How, as an architect, as a practitioner, do I stay engaged in all of these changes? Like, I would love to hear any recommendations on how, like, I'm here trying to build my pipeline, trying to make payroll every month, every other week, depending on how we pay your employees, making sure that I'm just keeping my business afloat. The landscape around me is changing so quickly. How do I understand all of that as a firm owner and begin to make adjustments to my current workflow?
This may sound strange to you, but lean on the youngest people you're hiring into the firm. Because the youngest people that have completely grown up on technology, that it is completely second nature to the people graduating from school today to find a technology solution to make them more productive. And so these people are abhorred to like do menial tasks that make no sense, manually, when they can learn of an automated system that solves the problem. It doesn't mean every automated system comes around as something you ought to implement in your firm. But, allow young people to try things, introduce it to other people and through the grassroots. And that's almost my advice to young people as well. Like, that's how you become valuable to a firm, is by introducing change that you're not afraid to try and to introduce. It's got to come from the grassroots. You can read things all the time. You can join Slack groups, and there are all sorts of resources that, that you've probably been advising, your colleagues about. But it's trying things in very small experiments, because you don't want to bring something into your whole firm until you're really sure. But not being afraid to try things and giving people little projects to experiment with.
Yeah. And the other thing that I would love to get your perspective on is, because I've had this discussion with colleagues before, is why architects need to understand what's going on with AI. Because products that can change the market and shift the market as big as Revit, there's now Autodesk competitors are coming in.
Sure.
And my worry is that if we are not engaged as architects in the development of the technologies, then we're just going to be forced to use these technologies that actually would have been so much better off had they have had the architect's perspective in the building of them.
I couldn't agree more. There are very smart technologists, and then there are subject matter experts in the world. And the only way good software ever gets built is when you team smart technologists with subject matter experts, people that do the job for real. And, also, there are a lot of interesting software out there that is so difficult and clunky to use that could be used for architects, but they won't use it because, of an architect's visual sense and sensibility of design. And so, quite frankly, a lesson for technologists: if you want to solve architects' problems, collaborate with them. Get there, show them prototypes, get them to use early versions, and then, it does soak up a little time for an architecture firm, but then they get their ideas imprinted and wind up with a product that would be useful to them. That's going to ultimately save them time to, design more, to be more creative, to build a better solution for their clients.
Yeah. I appreciate that view, because I've had a discussion with my colleagues that they're like, we're not technology people, we're not software people. It's not us to build the software. And I was like, but if you end up using the software, You absolutely need to be engaged in the conversation rather than have that software built without you. I wanted to back up a little bit to something that you said about leaning in on the younger folk, because one of the pushbacks that I hear back from firm leaders is, the younger individuals don't understand that this block I'm dragging around on my computer screen is actually made up of a whole bunch of different components that go together. So how do you bridge the hand drawing is important because you're drawing every single element that goes into a detail. And that's crucial to learning construction on the site, with the need for us to engage in these new digital tools to be more effective and productive.
I think digital tools need to be more to be more have a better ability to explain what it is happening behind the scenes and to make recommendations to people as they do them. In other words, I keep going back to Acelab, but if you select a piece of cladding, we could tell you what other pieces of the assembly are needed. Right. We could explain that there's an assembly there and that there are fasteners that are needed. There are sealants that are needed. There are connecting components. We can show you a picture at that moment of how that assembly goes together and then give you the choices of the compatible elements. So I really feel like the technology can play a better role illustrating to not just young architects, but even architects that have been practicing for a while that may not have all the experience of the people that have started by hand having to draw out every element. So to me, it's about the intelligence of some of these technologies to be both a solution and educational in the process.
Yeah. No, I agree too. And, with some of these new technologies, yes, they are intuitive, but there's definitely a learning curve that comes along with understanding what it is that you're manipulating. Right. So if the education is built in, I think that's in terms of the ability to onboard people faster into the space. It helps with my change management that I need to deal with from a digital technology transfer or digital transformation implementation.
Firm leaders have to invest more in the training of people. I mean, the best way to train young people and how a building gets put together is take them to building sites.
Right. Yeah.
that are being built, where the walls are opened, and then take a CAD file out and show them, this is where we are so far, and this is what's being built. And I think that connection to the physical world is what's needed for young people to make that connection to, whether it's lines and arcs or it's CAD lines or CAD models. They need that connection to the physical world.
Yeah. So speaking of the young folks, again, we have a lot of younger listeners on the show. So one, what advice do you have to aspiring architects, especially those that are like, oh, like, how do I take this knowledge of Acelab and go tell my leaders now that we should consider using Acelab as somebody who might not necessarily be in a management position at a firm?
I think you've got to take chances in life if you want to make progress. And we should all want to work places that reward that, quite frankly. And so I think tools like Acelab and others like them, try them on your piece of work. Show it to your colleague. Have them try it. Use a grassroots approach that says, then you bring it to a more senior person and says, look, this didn't even cost us anything. And I just saved 20 hours and found 3 better products for this important project we're building for one of our most important clients. Really? Wow, where did you find this? And by the way, not everything you experiment with is going to work. So, my encouragement is don't be afraid to make a mistake. It's the only way we learn things. We don't learn things by doing everything right. But try, use it on something real, show it to one person, show it to a second person, get a little consensus, build grassroots excitement, then bring it to a more senior person. And I think that's a good formula. I don't know that I want to call all the senior partners of every firm and convince them to use Acelab. I'd rather convince all the people in the firm, hands down doing work, make them more productive, and they're going to hear about it, and it's going to grow that way organically in a firm.
And outside of Acelab, what are some takeaways that you would like to give to architects maybe who are also interested in having a more entrepreneurial spirit in the field going forward?
I think it's important to understand business, and to learn about business and how it operates as well, because you can't do a good job for your clients if you're not running a good business, because you won't be able to hire the best talent. You won't be able to spend all the right time on something that you need to. And so understanding how a business really should run effectively, is to me a very important thing, as well as being willing to experiment with technology and finding ways to make processes more efficient. So you free people up to do what they went to school for, which is to do exciting design work.
And then I want to end with one last question. What are you most excited about, or what gets you most excited about when you look at the future of the AEC industry and where it's headed?
I think it's exploding with technology right now. I think honestly, it was a little stagnant for, Revit came along and some other design tools, and it was quiet for a while. I think it's exploding now. Digital twin, AI technology, database, advanced search technologies, collaboration technologies. I think it's exploding right now, and it's going to be a great time to make the built industry much more productive.
Hi, Disruptors. Thank you for joining us today on an episode of Practice Disrupted. If you like the content for today's show, you can find all of our past episodes over on practiceofarchitecture.com/podcast. Be a part of the conversation by joining me, our speakers, and other disruptors in our community at practiceofarchitecture.com/community. Our social media handle is Practice of Arch. That's Practice of ARCH. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to drop us a DM and say hello. Tune in next week for a new conversation on change in the profession.